Всем здравствуйте. Hello everyone. I'm glad to welcome everyone here in the third part of our conference, and with the foreign speaker Giles Lindsay. Hello Giles. With his speech about the future of agile leadership. Giles, I'm glad to greet you here from Moscow and have your time.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you for the very warm welcome. Okay, thanks everybody. Thank you for the introduction. And I'm Giles, and this talk is all about agile leadership for the future. Now, before I begin, I hope everyone at the conference today is safe and well and is relaxed as possible. So today's talk stems from my experiences, successes, and failures leading agile adoptions over the last 10 plus years, working with executive teams that have been both united and disconnected, and understanding the journey that agile leadership has been on to get where it is today. What's a bit of a pivot to the title of the talk? I'm going to be highlighting 5 common challenges that agile leaders frequently face in the workplace when trying to create an environment which allows agile to succeed. Now, these challenges create the most amount of friction with our jobs daily and need resolving in the present before agile leadership in the future further evolves. As I will mention often, the Agile Manifesto has been around for nearly 20 years, and yet we are still experiencing issues with agile ways of working that we were facing back in 2010 or even earlier. Agile leadership in 2030 will be no different from now unless we resolve these challenges first of all. So as I mentioned, the purpose of this talk is to look at some of the challenges that are limiting agile leadership in the present before agile leadership in the future evolves further. Now, I don't want to focus on the whole talk on this particular topic, but I do want to share what I believe agile leadership is today, who an agile leader may be, and some of the attributes that I think makes a great leader. So, what is agile leadership? Agile leadership is the practice of creating change that helps build a truly agile organization. Now, that's it in a nutshell. Agile leaders will have a passion for learning, open innovation, developing people, and can create and communicate the vision of the organization. It's also the craft of creating the right context for self-organization within an environment where agile teams collaborate, learn from each other, get quick feedback from users, and are focused on quality and continuous learning. Now, these leaders do not micromanage the people or create total freedom. They balance the anarchy and strict structure that is really crucial in today's organizations. Developing and, more importantly, maintaining this right environment is often hard work. These leaders focus on principles such as designing and improving the culture, facilitating teams to take ownership, coaching these teams to understand the agile mindset, promoting and learning and feedback from experiments and failures, and co-creating long-term goals with the teams so that they know what they are aiming to achieve. Now, additionally, these agile leaders have to operate well in a wide range of circumstances, especially new, changing, challenging, and often ambiguous situations. So, who in an organization is an agile leader? Think of the role of the agile leader as a placeholder for whatever you decide to call the role. Now, it's going to depend somewhat on your organization and how you organize your work accordingly. An agile leader, for example, could be a coach, a senior executive, a product owner, even a project manager, a scrum master, a release train engineer, a coordinator. The list goes on and on. One mistake I have wrongly seen happen several times: you don't necessarily need to go out and hire someone specifically as an agile leader within your organization. You may already have many agile leaders. So for whoever's in this position, it is a critical function, and it needs to be a key part of an organization for any complex cross-functional endeavor that involves more than a handful of teams. The person or persons in the role needs to be motivated, dedicated, and skilled, living and breathing the agile mindset and philosophy that supports it. Now, the reason I say persons is that the agile leader doesn't necessarily need to just be one person. It can be a pair or a small close-knit team, as long as they collaborate tightly and speak with one voice. Now, while it seems obvious, these agile leaders need to not only be strategic, but also lead in the present to address any issues or challenges the team may be currently facing. They must also inspire creativity and innovation with employees, so that as the organization moves forwards, employees are contributing to its success. Now, you can't always rely on what worked yesterday to solve tomorrow's problems. So agile leaders need to use their experience as a tool, but mustn't rely on it solely to solve problems. Agile leaders take pride in being resilient and creative in what they accomplish by ultimately being flexible and open to change. Agile leaders are those who can adapt to an ever-changing and uncertain environment. Learning from this prepares them to handle whatever happens next and makes them an excellent role model for others. Agile leaders constantly challenge beliefs and assumptions so they can meet the needs of the moment versus clinging on to a cause that is perhaps already lost. And agile leaders need to navigate uncharted waters, ambiguity, and chaos on a daily basis, all the while remaining fully connected with the team or the teams. Next, in uncovering who our agile leaders are within the organization, their leadership will have a positive effect on that organization at two distinct levels: the structural level and the behavioral level. Now, on the structural level, agile leadership affects things like processes, roles, responsibilities, KPIs, etc. On the behavioral level, it refers to specific actions being taken by these agile leaders in certain situations that are underpinned by particular mindsets and abilities. Taken together, these structural and behavioral effects reinforce each other and culminate in a leadership experience that extends its influence across the entire organization. Now, talking of influence, the following points for me are key to understanding the role of the agile leader. Leaders and managers both mobilize people and resources and explain the vision. But that's where it ends. Leaders focus on goals. Managers focus on tasks. Leaders take risks. Managers mitigate risks. Leaders sell it. Managers tell it. Leaders go against the grain. Managers go with the flow. Leaders motivate. Managers approve. Leaders inspire trust. Managers expect control. Leaders foster ideas. Managers assign tasks. Leaders innovate. Managers use what works. So this leads nicely on to the challenges. And as I often do at conferences and meetups and webinars on topics I'm passionate about, I like to share the most common, most often experienced, and possibly hardest challenges that I see or face most often in my career that are limitations or blockers for me in my quest for being an agile leader and enabling agility the best way possible throughout organizations. I'm not necessarily providing solutions for these, but I'm going to share and highlight the challenges and some of the things we can do to limit them, which you will see follow a well-trodden path of recurring patterns, which then become opportunities for us all as an agile community to help truly solve together. And I'm going to explain more about that at the end of the talk. So challenge number one, where organizations wrongly claim to be agile. The term agile is often applied to organizations or parts of that have no substantive claim to any kind of agility whatsoever. This usage wrongly leads to many organizations being called agile, even though they are still managed through traditional bureaucracy without any true agile leadership. This over-eagerness to self-identify as agile has created fake agile or agile theatre among organizations that misunderstand or simply choose to ignore the true application of agility. To understand whether an organization is agile, you have to look beyond what they are simply saying. You have to look at how they are operating. Some of the most successful organizations that have implemented an agile way of working don't even use the standard terminology of agile or worry about calling themselves agile at all. Now, this is known as agile without the label. Their business agility, coupled with great leadership, is an important reason why they've become the most valuable organizations in the world today. The uncomplimentary phase, agile in name only, applies to organizations that have too narrow a focus and are only implementing parts of the agile process while ignoring leadership, culture, structures, governance, and without embracing the agile philosophy and values, which are shared and embodied by the agile leader. Now, to avoid uncomfortable scrutiny, some organizations even cover themselves in agile camouflage, borrowing the ceremonies and words of agile methods and frameworks without changing their underlying work habits or having the correct leaders in place to change this. Ultimately, these organizations are simply doing agile without truly being agile. There is often a lack of commitment seemingly throughout that organization. They don't understand why the change is happening and are not committing to what is necessary to successfully achieve it. As mentioned earlier, this claim by organizations calling themselves agile can never be genuine if they do not have the right leadership, sharing that agile philosophy and set of values, enabling the required change and evolution. To be truly agile, an organization today needs to operate in a very different way, with leadership, values, and norms all reinforcing the philosophy and culture. Now, if you're an agile leader coming into an organization that is resisting change and operating by doing agile in name only, this is a substantial hurdle to overcome. It may even be impossible. Challenge number two, where agile is for the software teams only. The Agile Manifesto and the corresponding principles were originally written for the context of software development and was intended to address issues that software teams faced in the late 1990s and early 2000s. The fact that the wording of the manifesto is limited to software development is less than adequate as a definition of business or organizational agility for today or for the future, meaning there is a need for the manifesto to evolve further. When agile processes are introduced to, or sometimes forced upon, software teams in those traditionally managed organizations, Without the right coaching or leadership, they run into conflict with other parts of that business that have much more bureaucracy and are less flexible to change. Organizations will still be behaving in exactly the same way in 2030 unless we work together to bring about a major change to organizational design and current ways of thinking. Because the current version and most widely shared definition of Agile is all about software development, senior management often become confused asking, isn't Agile just for software only? Now, as I've personally experienced far too often, certain non-Agile leaders in an organization undergoing a change or evolution or transformation, or whatever you and your organization call it, think all that's involved is the software teams having to learn a new framework. As an Agile leader, I've had to coach many senior managers and executives on Agile Foundation courses to help them understand what it is all about. So, understanding the Agile philosophy and being able to manifest those values at all business levels is critical for the Agile leader to help build and grow the truly Agile organization now and in the future. In arriving at this software-only perception without the right leadership and philosophy in place, Agile often ends up as just a couple of pieces of the process cobbled together, maybe some sprints for development purposes, but with no adoption within the rest of the organization. Often intensifying the idea that Agile is simply the coding part, which senior managers believe don't require other elements, departments, and actors involved in the overall process. Now, this again creates a version of fake Agile within that same organization and limits the idea that Agile actually refers to the ability of that organization to rapidly respond to change and to continuously improve. If you are an Agile leader brought into this kind of environment that is unaware it needs to change or is simply resisting it, you need to find ways and try different approaches to enable agility throughout the whole enterprise and not just have it working for the software teams, to ultimately remove large parts of this friction across the organization. Now, this can be achieved with things like systemic coaching, sharing the why we are doing this journey, learning from other organizations, introducing things like communities of practice and communities of experience, finding your organizational champions to support you on your change initiative, and creating the right ways of working. The idea that Agile should operate across the entire organization, aka business agility, is not necessarily new, but it can only be a positive thing. I hope everyone agrees. The Agile business can then become more adaptive, flexible, creative, and resilient when dealing with complexity, uncertainty, and change, leading to improved well-being and better outcomes for the individuals, the teams, and the organization. Challenge number 3, where Agile is disliked by the command and control gang. What's annoying about Agile to control-minded management at any level in an organization, but especially prevalent with middle or senior middle management in my personal experience, is that it recognizes a very big problem lies in control itself, especially when this gang worships at the altar of conformance and are not flexible to change. This same group seem to have the loudest voices, but lack the authority to make the necessary changes and are given misaligned incentives, leading to traditional behaviors to surface. Reconciling Agile execution and innovation lies in giving greater freedom to those actually doing the work, being able to exercise their talents and creativity, but doing so within short cycles so that they themselves can see whether they are making progress or not. Even worse for hierarchical control, agile leadership thrives on transparency. One of the dirty, not so little secrets of traditional middle management is that control thrives on non-transparency, especially when they follow the ideology of controlism from the top down. So introducing agile leadership means exposing all those non-transparent tricks that hierarchical managers play on their subordinates to maintain power. Is it any wonder then that Agile isn't naturally popular with the command and control gang and will as such not succeed if they do not allow it to flourish within the organization? There have been many well-documented situations, you only have to go and Google it, where an Agile transformation didn't deliver the expected improvements or even failed and was stopped because of the involvement of the command and control gang. Those who don't follow this group become an obstacle in their mind and not a benefit. With such defenders of controlism, who needs enemies? So when advocating a new approach or a new way of working, it is natural to openly highlight the flaws of the current ways of doing things. If everything were perfect already, why would people listen to us? Now, this is where the biggest friction comes from. Agile leaders and coaches have suggested many ways to deal with an organization that has a command and control management style. For example, by assessing if that organization is truly ready or not for Agile in the first place, before even thinking about whether there's a future for it or not. And these same leaders need to be very wary of the damage from anti-Agile propaganda from this group, which also limits the success of any Agile adoption. If an organization genuinely wants Agile and its leadership to succeed, the hardest lesson for this command and control gang is learning to trust the Agile leaders and the people in the teams, then recognizing when to get out of their way. It's down to us all to help guide and coach the best way possible to allow this happen and to help remove the resistance to change. Challenge number 4. Where Agile is constrained by bureaucracy. One thing hasn't changed with the popularity of Agile. There is still lots of pressure from the top down. Now, I hope you all agree, but I personally believe in an ideal organization. The C-levels should, if not must, transform and promote the Agile changes too. And I've worked with some amazing technology leaders and mentors who have done just this throughout my career. And I'm sure there's lots of people here today who have similar people in mind too. But I've also worked with those C-levels who haven't supported and promoted the changes, believing they somehow know better when clearly they didn't. One author, Gary Hamel, gave a vivid description of bureaucracy and this top-down pressure in a front-page Harvard Business Review article that titled "Bureaucracy Must Die," that summed it up as: strategy gets set at the top, power trickles down, big leaders appoint little leaders, individuals compete for promotion, compensation correlates with rank, tasks are assigned, managers assess performance, rules tightly circumscribe discretion. So as such, these same executives are still trying to snap their fingers, trying to become agile magically, and are hoping for a faster time to market, which ultimately never comes for them or anyone else, or simply choosing to ignore it altogether. And as I've experienced over the last 10 years, there are some in senior management, note, I do not call them senior leadership here, that don't understand what Agile actually is, and sometimes don't even want to understand. Now, this same group sometimes mistakenly think it's some kind of new anti-bureaucracy or voodoo, associating it with a lack of control or a lack of management, a chaotic free-for-all, if you like, with no plan, which leads to a lack of a coherent, coordinated approach across the organization, i.e., no clear view of the change, which together leads to the desired outcome. Or, possibly through an element of fear, They believe they're going to lose control of the products and not be able to make changes to them as and when they want to. Senior management often experiences friction with new agile ways of working, often due to the lack of education given of the journey being taken, even if they are the ones who mandated the change in the first place, or a lack of coaching to understand the why, or losing sight of the real goal, which is achieving successful business outcomes, not simply doing agile as some sort of tick in a box exercise to say the company is now agile. Big reveal moment, please. Drum roll. It's not all their fault. A fundamental issue for senior management is that the standard agile vocabulary, born from the foundations of agile with frameworks like Scrum, was devised purposefully to be unattractive to this senior management group. I understand why that's happened, but do not understand why it hasn't since evolved. One thing agile leaders and coaches have to be very mindful of is that these same frameworks have offered little or zero guidance to those people who actually have to change the most. Now, a lot of senior managers I know aren't actively fighting agile. They simply haven't understood how it applies to their roles and how to perform those roles in a way that enhances that genuine agility. Because of a lack of support and education for this senior management group, change has become so fast with our agile ways of working that these big hierarchical bureaucracies cannot cope. And in turn, that means senior management cannot cope with the pace of agile either. Sending commands up and down the management ladder is simply too slow and cumbersome and causes further friction if not managed properly by the agile leaders and coaches. If an organization is not careful, these new agile ways of working can wrongly become rediverted into yet another company reorganization driven by the same senior management team wanting to get control back over what is happening in the organization, creating even further change fatigue. Now, I've heard people talk of the soul of a department being ripped out with changes like this, especially when the agile leaders are let go. This invariably wrongly leads to a negative way of organizing instead of a positive way of working, and will create even further friction within an agile adoption and make it far less likely to succeed. If I was a betting man and I could see the future, I'd be able to make a ton of money on the fact that in 2030, organizations will still be operating the same way, as norms and ways of working will still not evolve if we are not leading this change now. Agile leadership throughout an organization is a lot harder than traditional leadership. If you're doing it right, you care a whole lot more. Often these agile leaders are the filter between the top level objectives and truly trying to motivate teams, making a difference and enabling delivery. Agile leaders must help organizations and senior managers understand that it's not a new level of anti-bureaucracy and that they will not lose control of their products, and understand that they need to help coach the senior management team to understand what it is they are committing to. And finally, they need to be part of the success criteria to help senior managers to become senior leaders. An agile leader is by necessity someone who lives and models this agile mindset. And so this leads very nicely onto our last challenge, where organizations have a fixed mindset. As discussed earlier, organizations that are very agile often shy away from the label agile and are moving away from a particular brand and using their own homegrown words, which feels more genuine. Now, the main difference between those organizations that can be claimed to be genuinely agile and those that can't is, for a large part, down to those adopting an agile mindset, from its people and culture to its structure and technology. i.e. being agile and not simply just doing agile. Those leaders that adapt to the continuum of agile will see the improvements over time versus those leaders that don't adapt due to their fixed mindset, where they go through the motions of just doing agile because of some wider company directive. As some people in organizations wrongly believe, an agile mindset does not simply see things in a polarized view, i.e. agile or not. An agile mindset is that set of attitudes that supports a truly agile working environment. Now, this mindset is necessary for agile leaders to cultivate those high-performing teams who in turn deliver amazing value for their customers. This mindset is also independent of terminology, labels, proprietary processes, or brands, and helps with fixing the perception of whether an organization can truly claim to be agile or not. If this mindset is cultivated by the leaders and nourished, the teams will experience amazing outcomes, happy employees delivering great value and great results. Ultimately, agile is all about embracing that different mindset or philosophy. Agile is not a system, not a methodology, not a platform, not an organizational structure. In my experience, when people and organizations have the right leaders and mindset, it hardly matters what tools, processes, and practices they are using. It makes things come out right. Now, conversely, if they don't have the right leaders and mindset, it doesn't matter if they're implementing every tool and process and practice exactly according to the book. No benefits will flow. And again, I've experienced this more often than not in my career. The agile mindset is the environment within which teams truly flourished, enabled and supported by great responsible leaders. If we want agile leadership to succeed in the future, then we need to collaborate, evolve, and overcome the 5 challenges I've shared here today in the present as a priority, and no doubt many others that can be shared by members of the audience here today as well. So finally, the journey for successful business outcomes. As I've already mentioned many times, Agile is that embraced philosophy and set of values brought about by having the right agile leaders and ways of working, supporting the people and the culture. Agile isn't a methodology to implement within the existing management framework. Agile is all about working smarter rather than harder. It's not about doing more work in less time, or as some people wrongly say, doing twice the work in half the time. It's all about generating more value with less work. You don't do Agile if you simply want the benefits. You have to be Agile. When you have the right leaders and coaches, the teams deliver within a business model that generates value for the whole organization as well as the customer. As an Agile leader, our goal should not just be about implementing Agile. Our goal instead is about enabling successful business outcomes. All said and done, Agile leaders are the key to enabling people and organizations to have the courage, knowledge, and belief to be truly successful. So, my parting thoughts from today. True Agile leaders embrace every aspect of agility. Set a clear vision with their team that they can embrace and own. Believe in their mission and live it on a daily basis. Build a culture of self-organizing teams. Create an environment that allows Agile to flourish and succeed. focus on what really matters, delivering value. Help their team members take care of the customers. And lastly, are awesome. So the challenges wrap up. As I mentioned at the start of the talk, the purpose was not necessarily to provide solutions or answers for the 5 challenges, but to share them, which impacts how successfully Agile leadership can operate in the workplace in 2020, which then becomes a catalyst and opportunities for us all as an Agile community to help solve together, especially if they are still being pervasive in our organizations today. So this leads nicely onto my last page. Final question and have your say. What is Agile leadership for you, and what are your Agile challenges? Now, on screen, you will see a QR code and a short URL that will take you to a 2-minute survey where you can answer this question and a couple of others too. The outcome from this research is going to be a report of the big challenges that are still affecting Agile leaders and Agile adoptions within our organizations nearly 20 years since the launch of the Agile Manifesto, and what we all need to do together to help resolve these challenges. It's going to be published in a white paper in early 2021. And I hope I can come back at a future conference and share the findings from these with you, leading to further workshops, projects, collaborations on overcoming many of the challenges through the Agile champions here, helping to provide and share answers and solutions, allowing the ways of working, or WOWs, to simply become commonplace in our organizations over the next 10 years. Enabling greater business agility and responsible leadership to be successful. Thank you everyone for coming to my talk today.
Thank you so much, Giles, for your insightful, deep dive into the future of Agile leadership. Unfortunately, we don't have much time for now to openly discuss the questions that came for you. There are several, but I will ask you to move to the room for a bit of talk with the listeners. And thank you so much again for your talk today. Thank you.